Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As an analyst in the industry and a former journalist covering hotel and restaurant technology trends, I often got the question, what is exciting in hotel technology? What are you seeing? And I always hesitated somewhat to answer this question right out of the gate because I feared that often the easy answer is something that is that borderline sci-fi, exciting, thrilling, buzzy answer. And what purpose does that serve? That can often lead us, not that those use cases don't have applicability and are very exciting, but they can often lead you down the path of technology for technology's sake. And what we're seeing now in the true landscape of hospitality is that hospitality does mean something different for everyone. So how can technology solve for that? And that is what is very exciting about the fact that we can have this individualized hospitality at scale. Now, there's some challenges with this, and as we look at what external and internal challenges hotels are facing, we see that they're working very hard to solve for this. But we see that as technology has raised the bar, and the bar for technology has been raised, hotels are recognizing that now they also feel the pressure from nimble competitors, which in legacy, the legacy experience of hotels, that was always more of a technology problem, nimble competitors, startups coming into the space. But now, as technology has become an equalizer for brands to offer guests exciting experiences, other hotels realize that there's this need to keep up. With all new technology that comes into play, then there's always that shifting technology regulation and compliance, data security, as we heard earlier, and privacy concerns. And then with that, we see hotels are very challenged by selecting innovation partners. And I find this interesting because there is a nuance here. It is technology suppliers by its nature often. However, the innovation part is what's key here. It's finding those technology partners who really understand the business. And we see a lot in our data that comes through IDC about the importance of having industry-specific solutions. And now, not that the exciting technology doesn't need to necessarily be built for hospitality specifically, but there is a need for an understanding of what those nuances of hospitality that make it unique and special and serve up that true high-touch experience for guests. On the internal side of challenges, what I find interesting is that hospitality has often more, what I would say are softer challenges, as we see at the bottom here, this lack of commitment to invest. But this is beyond just getting buy-in from a finance group of getting the money to buy technology. It also is the importance of getting your employees to be on board with the technology that is put in place to make those experiences better, to make the operations more efficient, to provide the employees the ability to really serve up better experiences for guests. And a lot of time, no one likes change. Adopting a new system or understanding how it's going to make their lives easier can be a challenge. So it's getting that buy-in across the board, or in some hotel experiences, from a franchisee level. We also see that hotels struggle a great deal with data. Having good data, knowing where their data is, having visibility across the organization, and knowing how to surface up that data at the right moment, at the right time, to provide the exact experience that a guest wants. And then top challenge on internal is insufficient automation. And now automation, I love the fact that it is no longer the dirty word that hotels never wanted to talk about. We're not going to do automation because that's not who we are. We're hospitality. We're beyond that. But in this instance, and as we heard from the previous speaker, it is that operational efficiency, that making you better workers, and being able to really streamline and remove friction from all experiences. And when we look at what digital innovation are top priorities, not surprisingly, improving customer experience is going to be one of the top objectives. But we also see that the speed of innovation is a huge objective, is being able to have technology in place that will make it easy to scale and shift as consumer and guest demands change, which is really what is driving the force behind hospitality. But then the other interesting thing around this is that developing new revenue monetization opportunities, and this goes back to that individualized hospitality at scale, is understanding what do your guests really want and what could be valuable for them in a particular instance, and being able to drive some revenue from that. When we look at our IT budgets, we have been charting this over, and even in the days of the pandemic, hospitality was investing in technology. This was a perpetual thing. We saw IT budgets increasing. And even when things leveled out a little bit, we were keeping the same level. And what is interesting is that there is a sentiment with about a third of hotels that they told us in our survey data that they view the disruption in the marketplace or business challenges as an opportunity to leverage technology to drive business growth, which I think is a wonderful half glass, half full type of sentiment to have. And even when we ask, what are your views on the market challenges? And about 40% say, we're probably heading into some tough times ahead. But when we ask, well, what are you doing with your IT budget in response to that? And it's not an overall reduction in IT spend. Rather, it is specific areas, being careful about what are we pulling back on and where are we spending. And that also says, well, what areas are immune to IT spending if we enter a time of recession? And not surprisingly, the top two most immune areas for IT investment are around security, which, as we just heard, it's obviously, and the second is AI and automation. So once again, coming back around to the importance of AI. Now, when we think about this, what are the objectives of digital innovation? And I love this data point because we ask global industries where are they looking and what is the goal for innovation, and it is the complete inverse for global organizations. When we look at hospitality specifically, it is this representation here. Hospitality is very focused on driving value and being differentiation, whereas other industries focus more on, if it's going to be innovation that they're investing in, they want it to be disruptive and they want it to be way far afield, those sci-fi elements, and be first to market. Whereas hospitality, we recognize it's important, how is this going to make a difference in our organization? Obviously, when we think about the efficiency, that's rote for all industries. Everyone wants to be more efficient and drive those operational efficiencies. But for hospitality, the key is that contextualized experiences, is being able to make employees more efficient, make the organization more efficient, but while giving that high-touch experience to guests and understanding who they are, which is really hard to do at scale, especially if you're having data issues. When we see these challenges that bubble up, removing friction from the hospitality experience is not a new sentiment. I've been talking about this for years. We love to talk about it. But how are we doing it? They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So we look at how are we leveraging up leveraging today's technology, and that's what's truly exciting, leveraging the technology that's here today to be able to do that. And we see the utilizing data in the appropriate way is where we'll be able to do that. And we can't get through a presentation without talking about AI. And IDC actually has a driver for moving ahead with, and they said AI everywhere. And as a lover of movies, I could never finish that sentence without saying everywhere all at once. There's the Oscar-winning movie from last year. But it actually has some great through lines in this movie that I feel like are very applicable, about fighting with empathy. And I don't know if you're not familiar with the movie, the main character has to go across dimensions and identify different versions of herself throughout these dimensions and understand her enemy and fight with empathy. And I think it's a great message to when you understand the guest, not that they're not our enemy, but you understand where they're coming from and be able to give them the service that they want. Also, to across dimensions, if we change that to channels, where are they coming from? Are they talking to you on WhatsApp? Do they prefer to be through your mobile app? Are they online? Are they in front of you? Do they want that guest-facing experience? And then there's the concept of infinite outcomes. There's so much data, and that's always the struggle. We have plenty of data, we just don't know what to do with it. And that can lead to this omniscience overload, that there's so much out there. How can you surface that to an employee so that they can make sense of it and use it in that moment? And that's where we're seeing the true excitement around AI. And yes, there's the various types. We can talk about the buzzier cousin of vanilla AI being Gen AI and what that is. But we see that organizations are looking at how to be predictive and how to interpret the data that they have. And that's where the true value is going to come in. Because so to go back to the initial point, that hospitality can mean something that is different for everyone. And at the end of the day, the technology that guests remember is usually the one that fails. And so to make technology invisible is to make it really seamless and make sure that it's an appropriate technology that they will want to use and ideally not even know was there. So I think that is really what is shaping the landscape of hospitality today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Grab a seat. We're going to slowly fill up our chairs on the stage. But the next speaker I wanted to welcome from across the street, Fiona, come on out. I've got your clicker.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I am indeed across the street in a windy walk. I joined Booking, indeed I joined the hospitality industry just as we were coming out of the pandemic. And it struck me that it was a really complex business and industry. But what I take comfort is that some of the challenges and some of the changes we see right now are not unique to hospitality. In fact, they're quite close to the digital world of online retailing and the consumer goods world I spent the 30 previous years in. But today I'm going to give perspective to you from Booking.com, which is a two-sided marketplace. Is that one up? There we go. That's always like when tech doesn't go with me. But Booking is a piece of the industry, but the way we look at the industry is a two-sided marketplace. We're a pure online player, and therefore the ecosystem around us is very much how we see having set up to deliver the two sets of customers we have and their needs. And we have the travelers on the one side, who are the consumers, the guests, which you all have, but we also have partners as customers. And I want to thank you in the room who do business with us for continuing. But the ecosphere we're in is very much set by the things that come around trying to serve both two sets of customers at the same time and using increasingly technology to do so. Now, if I look at the changes which we have in the industry, solving those needs is, of course, the first place we look. And it's not only about AI, I will come on to it. But we bring incremental demand to our partners, to you. And actually working with consumers and seeing where they are is completely changing. Consumers spend, well, a lot of their time on social media, but social media is 30% of all media that's consumed, which is huge. And actually, Gen Z do more of their research for destinations and trips through social media than they do through search engines, which could change a lot of things. And Gen Z think people are also quite picky, and they actually like to have personalization, and they get very upset when they don't have it. So it's something which we're increasingly doing there. But for partners too, personalization is something which we're looking into to make sure that we bring you the right demand, but also make sure we do so in a way that brings it all the way through to the bottom line in a sensible way by giving you tools and insights. And that deserves personalization too. And that's where we use AI to solve those problems. So technology progress, of course, is a big change in the industry, but we've been doing it for a long time. It just wasn't called AI, it was machine learning, etc., etc. But the things that pop up as well as Gen I, which you can expect to see in things like the trip planning, of which there's a beta out there already in the US, but the customer service and the whole inbound area, or actually internal tools to make coding and working internally much more efficient, which I'm certainly looking forward to. But it brings us to question security and identity, and how do we manage that? How do we verify it? And how do we do it in a seamless way for everybody? And of course, we're in an attractive industry right now, which has been very resilient after the pandemic. And so, of course, cybercrime comes where there's money, and we expect to see more of it. And so we're working together with probably 500 machine learning scientists or data scientists looking how we predict, prevent, and of course, remedy any fraud when we do get there. Those things bring, of course, the change of regulations, with everybody trying to manage what we maybe call this Uber moment of our gig economy. People want to look at how and who and where taxes are paid, remitted, etc., and processed. But also, how is AI responsible? How do we prove when we talk about sustainability in your properties that it really is? How can we verify these things at scale? And of course, introduction of short-term rentals and everything, verifying what we have in our ecosystem. So those are big changes. And last but not least, we can't avoid talking about world events which shape where we can go, where we go, and of course, with climate change out there, trying to preserve being able to go to as many places as possible. If I had a future glass or crystal ball to tell you the future, what I thought was coming, I would tell you how I think things are going to go. But this is the closest I have to one of those, which is the Booking.com sphere in Las Vegas. Maybe some of you saw that about 2 weeks ago. But the reason I show that is not just to say the great stuff we're doing in advertising, but hospitality is in the space of also being up there with the Coca-Colas of this world, in vying for attention from consumers who are increasingly distracted. And this is the biggest outdoor LED screen on the outside of a building, perhaps larger than some of the properties in Vegas itself, which who would have thought we'd be doing that? So advertising will continue to be creative and follow eyeballs, and that's one of the things which will be consistent in growing but changing in our industry too. And how I would describe a future industry and what the things which I hope we preserve as stuff changes are that it's going to be connected. We have a connected trip vision as a company in joining the types of travel, but also working together through different companies. Following and joining the dots of the data is a must-do, as well as with consumers. But it needs to be creative, obviously, in order to stand out and actually be the brand that's seen in a discoverable, intensely busy world, particularly online. It's about having something that's different. Collaborative is something which I love and want to see us do more of, and solving things together rather than in our silos in individual businesses, because the stuff we're seeing and talking about is going to be very transformational. And last but not least, it's going to be a compliant world. Now, that's not to say it's not compliant at the moment, but the emphasis on some of the back office, or I say back office processes, to be able to verify and do things and show that you're doing it in a digital world at scale is quite a fundamental change for how we look at processes and even the data fields we have available to capture the stuff on our various different systems. Just going into two of those in a detailed way, I hope and I want to see these things happen because I can see them happening today. And if I look at the connected sphere, we've talked about the impatient consumer wanting a one-stop shop, multiple things in their basket, whether that's different types of trip or different things and add-ons in your property. People want it where they are, and so connecting those things together is something we're very much working in many places today. But also data, and I think data is gold. If I was to bet on anything into the future, I think having data as a currency would be where I might actually put my own money, not just Bitcoin. Because actually being able to connect different sorts of dots and actually be able to find a different insight to delight a customer in a different way through the different systems we have can be that differentiator that makes a difference. But also your proprietary data as a company, when you're building the AI stuff, currently we're all using open source, but when you have your own data, that's where you can actually feed those machine learning models with something different. And so for me, valuing it, making it better, more reliable, and collecting it in different ways, I do think is going to continue to be a differentiator. And that means, of course, seamless connections between companies, between providers, between Muse and ourselves, obviously, to make it just easier that we can have systems that speak to each other so we don't lose joining the dots on that precious data journey. Collaboratively, I have to say, I think I'd like to be doing much more of that with many of you in the room here so that we actually find solutions for our industry. I talked last week at our own offsite about trust and safety in a way that really we have to solve together, simply because these things don't happen inside systems, they are between systems, and where the bad guys have the AI too. So it's a challenge to stay ahead there. But also, we've just seen this morning some scary stuff about AI, and you can't take back bad AI when you build it. It's sort of out there, and it stays there. So doing things knowledgeably and together that can give us a leapfrog together, I think, is where we should be trying to do. So I call it co-opetition rather than collaboration and competition. And very last but not leastly, I talk about omnichannel, and I think the collaboration, if I go back to what we exist to do for yourselves, which is all about incremental demand, not just thinking that we're fighting over pieces of a pie and that we all own the same customer all the time. Tech can connect customers on completely different sides of the world and bring demand from one place to another very easily. And actually, it's finding where there are gaps that add value for everybody and where we bring incremental demand and value to each other rather than assuming it's the same thing and fighting on a race to the bottom through price, which happens quite a lot. So I get excited about exploring that one a different way. If I was to put my own money on the one thing I think is really going to stand a change or stand the test of time and change our industry, I'm not going to say AI, which might be a disappointment to people. That is undoubtedly going to disrupt things. But I think it's the way we are going to collectively approach trust and safety. Trust and safety software, I saw an alarming stat just recently, as an industry is going to go from something around 7 billion to more than 15 billion in terms of an industry itself. Not just because of trying to fight cybercrime, But the process flows, the systems, the regulations, and the very sort of detailed tech behind it that takes to do that at scale needs to change. And it's a different type of discipline in how we do stuff. I come from a sort of scrappy world of getting stuff out there in beta, but we need to make sure that actually these stuff stands the test of time with safety, because we put our trust into brands. And I, as a mom, I get phished with my email, but I get texts and things pretending to be my kids late at night. That stuff that pulls on how we feel about services makes me dismiss them. And yet I can shop online, I can bank online, do my taxes, move country, put IDs in very confidently with other companies. And the difference between how I feel about those different providers is how they handle my data and my financial details, such that I go back far more directly to them than the spend on that flashy advertising or brand that drove me there in the first place. So that would be my bet, and I invite us to do some of that together as we work to create a sustainable future that's safe and trusted. So thank you very much.
We got spot on 10 minutes. And the last chair, I wanted to just invite Joanne, who's going to talk to us about some of the bigger macro trends, and I'm really excited to bring you back on stage.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And a great pleasure to be with you in this amazing venue. I think we're going to kick off with a little video, if it's out there, just to show you what we're going to be talking about.
I should have started that.
Where's the video? I haven't got a dance.
Click twice.
Do I click twice? Okay, that's me.
And one more.
And one more. Voila. So this is what I'm going to talk about. So this is a study that we've done at Deloitte very recently in relation to the future of the consumer. And clearly for this audience, it's how do we bring that into the hospitality space. So as mentioned on the video, we've identified 6 forces shaping the future. And they're up here. I'm going to go through them all a little bit one by one and really focus on 2 or 3 points on each of the trends that link with the hospitality industry. I may skip slightly quicker over some of the tech trends because we have some more amazing experts on tech than myself. And so, I'll jump around a bit. Now, behind these 6 forces, how do you get to 6? Well, you start with this. And then it makes you sick, so you reduce to 6. So, when we talk about shifting society and culture, we're talking about the decline in trust. That's already been mentioned. Changing role of women. We'll be looking at delayed and declining marriages. So all those trends, pulling them together, trying to put them into 6 forces, and then come back to, per each industry, what does that mean? Some of these do not have an impact on an industry. Some of them have an incredibly significant impact on an industry. So just if you want to dip into the detail, then go and have fun. That's what's behind it. The changing consumer. Let me pick up, and on some of the slides, I might not go through all of the trends noted, but let me focus on wellness. And I had an amazing discussion with Laura at dinner last night on this one. wellness tourism is expected to hit $1.3 trillion. So we've been speaking about wellness for a number of years, and we're speaking about the spas. We've been speaking about put some yoga mats in the rooms, which, thank you, my room yesterday had a lovely yoga mat in it. But this is going to be wellness at a different level. We're going to be way above the yoga mats going into the future. It's that real need to disconnect, but to reconnect with family. So it's not going to be the traditional wellness that everyone is wanting. And I was reading the press, I think yesterday, some stars are off to some camps where they're going to be completely disconnected for 30 plus days, et cetera, et cetera. So I really push on wellness and how that's going to drive the future. Second one on this slide, which I do actually find really intriguing, is the affordable luxury. And I always keep talking to my 21st and 21-year-old daughter. She's talking about luxury all the time, and I'm just like, well, how much cash do you actually have in your bank account, my love? Because something's going wrong here. And actually, the millennials are poorer than previous generations, but they want more luxury than potentially the previous generations wanted. So how can we get them affordable luxury? Moving on to an evolved society and a culture, and again, the trend in the middle is one that we've been speaking about a lot and definitely picked up a lot post-COVID, which is that mix of what we call, if you want to call it, leisure. 84% of Gen Z millennials believe working from anywhere is the new working from home. So we're not even talking about office against home, it's working from anywhere. And I must admit, when I talk to my teams and I say, we've got this consulting project, we need to go here, their first question is, and we stay the weekend? And, we add on days pre-post. So like, well, yeah, we can do, but that wasn't my main objective of talking to you about this project. But the divide is clearly not there. So how can the hotel industry, how can the hospitality industry reply to that? How can we really ensure that we're giving them that, pleasured experience and reply to their needs, which are not easy if you add the pet experience in there as well. So pet travel, what do we say? Expected to grow to USD 4 billion by 2030. 4 billion, that is huge. That, for me, is a market that I don't think many hotels have tapped into yet. And then if you put the pleasure with the pets, you're going to have a real different experience that you're going to be trying to create in your hotels to be able to reply to that need. So, the pet is not going to be just having that nice little mat in the bedroom. It's, how can you, look after all of the animal's needs during a 7-day stay, for example. So, picking up on an evolving society and culture who do want to travel with pets. And I've tried that out with a few people, and everyone's confirming that it is a yes. Tech, again, as I said, I'm not gonna stay on this slide, but I'll just pick up on, we've got that whole facial recognition, we've got surveillance. We're gonna go into a different experience when we'll be traveling in the future. Let me focus on this one. Influencers. Personally, not a huge fan. But when I read these numbers, I start to change. We're saying here that businesses can make an average of $6.7, we're in dollars, in revenue for every $1 spent. Now, why wouldn't you? 6.5 against 1, there's a pretty good ROI here. So, influencers here to stay, and we're looking at certain case studies here. We're in the UK, for example, 67% increase in revenue from using influencers. So again, something to consider if you're not already doing so. Skills gap, something that keeps me awake at night. If we want our industry to be delivering service, to be delivering personalization, how are we going to do it with 1 in 9 vacancies going to be staying open? And this is talking more about the European market. How are we going to be having the right people delivering those experiences? And again, a brilliant discussion at dinner last night. We're all remembering hotels very much linked with the people that we spoke to rather than the building that we're in. We're going to have to do something to attract the right people to our industry. Planet, again, it's been mentioned this morning, but for me, we're going to go up to a different level. It's no longer just going to be, that comment about, hanging up your towels. There's no paper. Sorry, there's no paper. There's no plastic straws, etc. I really think that the traveler of tomorrow is going to be wanting to know a lot more. If I go to this place or if I go to this place, what is my impact? And I really think we're miles, unfortunately, away from that, of being able to explain the full ESG impact of Hotel A against Hotel B. A lot of groups are doing things in this space, and everyone's trying, but I think the consumer of tomorrow is going to be wanting something slightly different. Cybercrime has been mentioned earlier. Scary number up here. We're saying that our industry is amongst the top 5 sectors that are attracting the hackers. Not a good place to be. But unfortunately, that's where we are, so we're going to have to deal with it. So it's how are we going to be able to address that as an industry together, and I think that was clearly the comment said earlier. We need to address that issue as an industry, and it's getting bigger and bigger. I'm from Paris, even though the accent doesn't really go. This is the #1 risk for the Paris Olympics, cyber attacks. It's pretty horrible and scary to say that, but that's what they're looking at. All that said, you've got your 6 trends down the side. That then means that we're going to have to change the markets, change the models, change the mechanics of the industry. So we thought the trends were enough to get our brains around, and how does that all work? It gets more scary, but I will leave that for another day. And just leave you this one. The best way to predict the future is to go ahead and create it. So after the day of information that you're getting today, I'm sure you're going to be armed to create the changes that are needed. Thank you. Do you want the zapper?
Grab a seat. You can go in the app, find Slido. You can ask your questions. I have questions prepared. So whilst you ask your questions, I'll kick off with a question each, and then see what questions come up and see if I can read them on that screen, because I am getting slightly older. Dorothy, I'd love to just chat to you. You said 41% of hotels are cutting investments in digital innovation due to some of the market pressures that we're seeing. But at the same time, hoteliers recognize the need for innovation. How do you balance those two out? Because it feels very contrarian.
And I think what surfaced with that was that it's not across the board a reduction in IT spend. They recognize everything is IT related. There has to be IT line items. But it is that specificity of where are we going to pull back, and what are they prioritizing more when they are looking at where are we going to invest the technology. And I think it was now echoed. It's recognizing we can't reduce our security. Security and compliance is going to be where our investments have to still tick up continually, because the threat vectors are changing way ahead of the speed of which we are. And then couple that with the fact of the talent shortage. There's, consistently the skills shortage and needing to retrain the existing employees that you have. And the #1 security threat is often the employees. It's keeping them, making sure how easy. I mean, if I have to change my password one more time for IDC, I'm rapidly getting.
That's a bad practice, apparently.
I know, and I'm getting to that point where I'm doing adding the exclamation point at the end, or it's like 1, 2, 3 at the end, just to keep up with it. And then the AI and automation. So that is the buzzier technology of the moment, and that's where the technology the investment will continue to happen. Will be in that but once again to couple that with the skills shortage.
Do you see it shifting towards AI? But where are they taking it away from? Well, what are the areas where hotels are cutting back on? Do you know?
We're actually seeing some reduction in services providers. That had bubbled up as a big increase area during the pandemic, and that's leveling out a little bit more. So if I had to pinpoint one particular area, also they had made a lot of investments in cloud during those times, and that now it was an investment that was already made. So now the costs are not as heavy as they were. The lift of moving to the cloud is now kind of running itself. So that's where we're seeing maybe it can level out a little bit more.
Thank you. Fiona, you talked about cybersecurity, and both of you actually brought it up. And it's one of those topics that as a hotelier, I'm like, oh God, sure, I have to take care of that at some point. But as large companies, I'm assuming you're under attack yourselves as well. So what are you doing to make sure that employees don't click on those links and those emails? Like, how are you kind of approaching that challenge?
Yeah.
And start with you.
Yeah, I think we're all under attack. And if I look at, I said it's one of the things that's new to our industry the last 12, 18 months, but it's been around for a good 20 years. It's not new. It's just we're seeing it slightly different and done differently. And it's everybody's challenge. I think booking hasn't been breached, fortunately, but I think these things are a matter of time. You know, if you look at statistics, things will happen. We're teaching ourselves the ways we're also trying to teach and share across the industry, because it's about a mindset shift. But I personally will get trained on stuff that's sent to me as pretending to be phishing internally, and if I click on it, you get a big da-da. So there's ways you can sort of make it playful, but also make it seriously. But, you know, having training that helps you see it through others' mindset. We have films, we have different things where you see what's actually possible, and it is happening somewhere. Banking has absolutely had these things happen. So looking where it is, even if it's not in front of you. And in terms of investments, it's funny, I do think rather than seeing these things as IT, I stood up publicly and said last week, as a commercial business leader, trust and safety and cyber stuff, it's my responsibility to put resources and time towards it. And rather than calling things innovation, these are much more hygiene factors and closer to now. And these are things we need whilst we get the AI bulletproof enough, as it were, and not instead of. And so actually stopping calling them innovation or stopping calling them IT helps you preserve them, and it helps you then lean in and learn a lot more about them.
Love that. And we have the same software that we use internally. When I get an email and I click on the link, it's our IT department trying to trick me. And then as I click on the link, I'm forced through an e-learning because I've clearly failed on it. And it's just constant training that you have to go through. But it's just changing so rapidly, I guess.
But it's if I may add, sorry, it's very sophisticated stuff. And I think not just working out how not to click these links or do stuff, very importantly is, if and when it happens, the speed of cleanup and actually the response is where the danger sits, rather than just the didn't I avoid it. Yeah.
I think what we try to do in our environment is very much share the stories. And it's via the stories that you put the pieces together and you realize how quickly you can get tricked into things. And then sharing those with our clients. You know, as David first thing this morning spoke about the voice. That's the bit that scares me even more, is is people pretending to be someone else. I think the phishing, we can sort of get it slightly under control.
Yeah.
It's going to be the telephone calls that are going to be the next level.
You can't recognize them anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's have a look what we've got there, and I can actually read it. Is optimization through AI the right way to go in tourism and hospitality? Can we recreate the happenstance that occurs in travel through technology?
I would have one quick thought on that. I think where AI is really the tool that we want to leverage is that it's not going to be those one-off experiences that a guest has an issue with. That's where the human interaction will be able to be leveraged. But the benefit of having AI is that all of the rote things that happen that can be automated and don't need a human touch, that will now be off the plate of your front desk worker or your general manager. And that when those unique little instances come up, or those higher level experiences, then you're able to much better prepared to be able to do that, because you're not heads down dealing with some other issue that AI can manage. So that's where I think the benefit of AI, especially for hospitality, is really key.
Yeah, they say AI won't replace people, but people who can use AI will be replaced by people who can't. And I think that's fair to say. How we equip people everywhere, and we're looking at adopting it everywhere, not just on the services, so that it becomes second nature. So I'm absolutely taking the advice we heard first thing, to go outside the door and do more of it, because the better we get on and doing it as a natural thing rather than leaving it to the tech people, and I'm not a tech person per se, I'm an engineer, but not super tech, we will understand it and live with it, and we can make it better because we're the ones experiencing how it's used, and that goes for how we see it.
It's only as good as the data that it has. And that's where that omniscience overload can come into place. We're not going to be able to process it as quickly, but it's still having that human input.
But creative and emotions are still going to be done better by people, and that's what you will do well in hospitality, in delighting that customer.
Nice. I actually like the next question for Joanne. How can hoteliers effectively upskill their staff to keep pace with the growing importance of technology in the industry? And I think you talked about so many trends, and I'm like thinking, they're all like, which one? What's the thing I do, and how do I train my team for it?
And I think that's what I take away. There's so many trends. So it's really saying where you're going to play and where are you going to pass?
Yeah.
How can you cover wellness and the pets and the bleisure, et cetera, et cetera. Now, trying to come back to that question, I would flip it the other way, which is allow your staff time and allow them to do things that are not necessarily in their job description in relation to the customers coming in the door. So I would maybe flip it the other way, which is, yes, they've got to know how to use the tech, but don't let it block them. Make sure they have the interaction with the clients. That's where I've always had the best experience in the hospitality industry, is the interaction that might only be 2 minutes, or it could be longer. So upskill, but don't overskill or over push into people's face.
Nice.
Yeah.
I really hope they solve the pets issue. It's a genuine thing for me personally, because I can't find hotels that support pets that are nice luxury hotels. Because I only want luxury when I travel on leisure. But like, I wish that I could find that information more easily, and I turn to AI to find me those hotels. But
Yeah.
it's just a baseline of allowing my pet in the door. And I love that you said like they should think about that entire journey for the pet. Because honestly, I care more about my dog Beyonce than about myself in that stay. So. Sorry.
I love the name.
I know.
Big fan.
She should be here.
I know she should be. She wasn't invited. Not pet friendly here. There's a great question here from Sean. Any tips on making the right investment decisions in AI and IT, as today's tech might be outdated tomorrow? And I think that's a really valid question. And I as a hotel with a limited budget, it's always this thing, okay, what's the thing that I need to buy today that's going to help me move this thing forward?
Well, I can tell you how I would do it, because we have the same challenges, right, just from a different side of the marketplace. Because it's so great to get behind all the Gen I stuff, the sexy things, it's about resisting those and making sure the stuff you're investing is still solving the same problems you have for your customers today. And that's a discipline and not getting carried away in the funky stuff. And hence I erred on the less sexy stuff, the regulation and getting the foundations, because it will be outdated. But the question is, can you take your data with you and build stuff that actually you can then reuse? And so that would be resisting and thinking how you're going to use pieces of it and letting go of the shiny stuff in place of the stuff that really is moving you forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the same investment decisions hotels have had with so many different choices. When I sometimes look around a hotel room and see the equipment there that I personally never use, and you talk to other people and other people are not using it ever either. There's a real need to look at that client experience. What does the client need? And then maybe there's a need to to flex up, flex down as well.
Yeah.
Not all rooms need everything.
But that's often the thing that we do. We put ourselves in a boardroom away from the operation to think, okay, holistically, what's the segments that we're serving and what's the experience we want, and then whiteboard that out, and then go back into the hotel and just sit in the lobby and just see what actually that experience is versus what you were planning for it to be. And it's super clarifying. Before I go into a client meeting, I spend usually half an hour in the lobby just observing, so that I get a sense of kind of how innovative that they genuinely are. So observing is sometimes the best way to approach this.
Well, and I think this is a really interesting dovetail with the prior question about the employee, about the employee upskilling, because honestly, those conversations need to happen about the UX for the employees. How are they utilizing the technology? And I think hotels don't need to be technology companies, so they don't need to be the ones that are necessarily worrying about developing AI or their software to keep up. That's why they have Muse, that's why they have their partners, and to be able to avoid the technology for technology's sake trap of where you have a piece of hardware now in your guest room that no one's utilizing. It is, what is the objective? What do our guests want? What do our employees need to serve those guests?
Yeah.
And how can we create a baseline to now build upon and be nimble so that we're not just stuck with something that is antiquated before we even get everyone up to speed on it.
Yeah. Like I think the topic that we will try and drive is like, what's the outcome that you're looking to achieve rather than the feature that you're looking for, because the feature might not drive the outcome, and that's a really difficult conversation to shift towards.
Yeah, definitely.
Joanne, you talked or somewhere in your deck I saw that 1 in 9 jobs will remain unfilled. Terrifying, right? We all are just dying for more team members to come in. Yeah. How should we deal with that as an industry?
It's incredibly difficult because you shift things around the world. Difficult in the service industry, and even that I don't think is going to answer the solution. So I think again it's re-examining everything you do, and what does the client really want. and then trying to make time savings, so people savings, on things that you're doing that no one even recognizes you're doing and no one cares about, to be frankly. So for me, it's going to have to come from that, because yes, AI tech will help slightly, but it won't do everything you need. So you're going to have to take away hours, tasks, be it, I don't know, cleaning, be it anything else you're doing that can free up time of people. Do you really need 3 restaurants open at the same time? Do you need the gym when there's one next door that maybe the hotel could use it, blah, 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 etc. So it's going to have to be looking at that. I don't think there's any other solutions. A lot of the big groups are then doing more learning programs to attract people in, progression programs, but we're all going to be fighting at the end of the day. So reduce your needs, I think, is the key point.
I sat at dinner yesterday next to Bob W, which is one of these new brands that have come up, and they basically run an entire building with one person because they chose not to have the restaurants. Yeah. And how that's just transformed it. And it's maybe not the hospitality that I might enjoy, but it's a highly efficient machine, and it's completely possible to completely automate that. But it's the choice of what's the brand that we're building, what's the hospitality that we're building. But those are choices that we can make today.
Yeah, and need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fiona, driving revenue in hotels, obviously booking, you want to drive your revenue, but we also want to drive our revenue. And you talk about the connected trip. How do those things merge? Is that more revenue for you, or is that revenue that we can also capture as hotels?
It's back to the growing the pie rather than fighting over the slice. But if you think, which is why I aired on the whole sort of consumer thing and the social media, we started with all of the ability to attract demand, from different corners of the earth and actually serve up that demand. And obviously we then provide tools for those on our marketplace to be visible and to capture that demand. So the demand is there, and we continue to invest in making sure they're coming in. How we drive it for different hoteliers, different partners, is giving you the insights and the service to help display your properties in the best way that capture it, and sharing the, not just the data, but things like the top search thing on our sites at the moment would be actually customer reviews. It's that social side again, or ancillary services if you have them. Let's help you show that. Free breakfasts and cancellations, because customers want the flexibility. And in the sort of short-term rental area, we talked about pets. It's pets and pools and parking. So helping you isolate what it is that makes the difference for those customers that we have, so that you can make them customers of yours too, really. That's kind of how we do it. And making sure that there's not overlap, so that you tell us where you have something you're missing, and we show you how you can fill that gap with incremental demand.
Brilliant. I want to thank you all. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed the conversation, but we are cutting into the coffee break now. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We will be... Coffee will be outside this room, but remember the small stairs that go up to our partner floor, to our product floors. There's coffee everywhere. The big stairs take you to the hollow box. We've got like an AI box where you can project people in and out. Just go and check it out, but just walk around. Don't just stick to this floor. Enjoy the coffee.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
You're wonderful.
Nope.
Thank you.